Good afternoon, Kgosi Mabe. Thank you so much for taking the time to come and speak to us and to enlighten us about traditional leadership and the relevance of traditional leadership, in the new world that we live in. And I say new world because we basically living in what we call a democratic society, which is existing alongside the traditional leadership. So this is basically traditional leadership is basically something that is not so well known and understood both in the academic circles as well as in the business circles. And I think the importance is actually highlighted even more by the fact that a lot of companies have a strategy of basically growing into Africa. So this is a dynamic that needs to be explored and understood a little bit more. So also being a business school that has a strong focus on Africa, we would also obviously want to understand African leadership or traditional leadership, so that we can also enlighten our students in that regard. So Kgosi Mabe, firstly, can I perhaps just give you an opportunity to introduce yourself, as well as the House of Traditional Leaders and the work that it does?
Well, thanks for the opportunity to discuss with you. As you said, you have already mentioned my name, Kgosi Mabe from Mabiskal, and I'm also the chairperson of Northwest House of Traditional Leaders. What I do basically is to head the House of Traditional Leaders, which is a statutory body comprising of 24 members and 5 executive members, for which I'm the chair. The aim is to make sure that the issues of traditional communities together with traditional leaders are filtered within the new democratic dispensation, and also to assist traditional leaders with the disputes in their areas, and also to make sure that the aspirations of our communities and working relation with government, be it national government, provincial government, and even municipalities are catered for. Basically, that's what we do. And apart from me as a traditional leader of my village, which is Mabiskal, where obviously I lead that community, coordinate, bring coherence and adhesion of the community members, and to make sure that the developmental programs and strategies of the village are carried forward.
Yeah, thank you so much for that, Kgosi. Now, many of us struggle to understand how traditional leadership and a democracy basically coexist, or how, so some people would even have the view that a traditional leadership regime is not democracy. So how do these two fit into each other, traditional leadership and democracy?
Well, I think the people have not explored much on traditional leadership, and is the first leadership, is the first administration in Africa, and it has been there time immemorial. Now, what we see when people talk about democracy, they talk about the election and immediately giving power to few people. But as in traditional leadership, the leaders, they are born. But when it comes to decision making, community members participate in what we call participatory democracy. Whatever program, whatever decision that will impact on the community, it is the community that take that decision in Khotla or in a meeting. So basically, we can learn from how we do things, apart from giving power or authority to few leaders that are in parliament, that are in ministers, or maybe councillors, even the MMCs. But in traditional communities, the real power is with the people. And we can still coexist because there are communities within those areas that need to be brought together, that need to work together and make sure that they share their resources together. So apart from that, we will find a lot of social ills that we find today is because traditional leadership has been, one can say, has been diluted, and as a result, we see all those many social ills.
Now, one of the common perceptions or perhaps misconceptions is that a traditional leadership represents a stagnant form of leadership, a form of leadership that basically says things should always be done how they've always been done, and things should not change. Is that perception a correct perception, or is it a misconception?
Well, I think it's a misconception. A traditional leader is born and it has been like that. But what changes is the administration of the community, is the one that doesn't evolve. We are developmental royal leaders. We also bring development within our areas, unlike the thinking that development can only be brought by municipalities or even provincial government. As of now, you find that there are areas that have resources, that have mines, that have tourism attractions, where you find there's a lot of economic activity that are spearheaded by traditional leadership themselves. We can mention those traditional communities in the country at large. So it shows that traditional leadership has now moved with time, that bringing development, bringing job creation activities within their own communities. And even some traditional leaders are farmers themselves, are business people themselves. They are lead by example. So it has moved with time and it's going to transform, or even not to transform per se, but to evolve with time.
Thank you so much. And that actually brings me to my following question, because oftentimes as corporates, we get to a point where we need to start looking for new avenues of growing our businesses or growing our portfolios of businesses. So are there any business opportunities or any untapped opportunities within these rural communities or within these communities that fall within the scope of the traditional leaders that corporate companies are perhaps not exploring sufficiently, that you can perhaps allude to?
There are a lot of business opportunities. I think because of the land availability, you can mining, agriculture, and even retail. Because if you can see, rural people are moving to towns to buy, to get their necessities. But if this retail that we see in towns can be moved to rural areas, I think it is going to keep the expenditure on transport, is going to bring a lot of development, and even people will not move to towns in search of such things. So I think there are a lot of opportunities. I think serious business people can come and invest their money, and they'll get good return for their capital injection.
Kgosi Mabe, thank you so much for taking the time to speak to us. We really, really appreciate it, and we really hope that this discussion will ignite additional interest in in traditional leadership, and encourage more students to actually study and understand, or better understand, traditional leadership and its relevance to the business world. Thank you so much.
Thank you. You are welcome.
Thank you.